Wild Thing, or as it has been so hilariously nicknamed, Mild Thing, which is the most accurate description I could ever give for this ride, is a Morgan hypercoaster at Valleyfair. The roller coaster towers over the rest of the park, boasts an impressive track length of well over 5,000 feet, kind of creating this perfect green backdrop. It's absolutely an iconic roller coaster, if only it were a good ride. This is going to be my full in-depth review. I'm going to be talking about everything you need to know with the attraction. So as usual, let's start off with the stats. We have a height of 207 feet, drop of 196 feet, max speed 74 miles per hour, and the ride is primarily made up of quote-unquote airtime hills, with a large helix twister section at the turnaround.
Now, the ironic thing about this layout is that there's really nothing wrong with it.
In theory, it should be great. There are tons of roller coasters out there with an out-and-back layout. Most traditionally by B&M, they're packed full of airtime, you really float up out of your seat, and they end up being the clear star in the park. Wild Thing has the stats. In theory, it should be a fantastic ride, but I just feel like it is poor execution. And I don't even think that's necessarily a dig at Morgan. They've done a couple other hypercoasters out there, including Steel Force and Mamba. These are both hypercoasters that I think have a much superior execution than Wild Thing. Between those three, this ride is clearly the weak link. Not saying that the Morgan hypercoasters are incredible or anything. When you compare them to the B&Ms, I mean, they definitely don't stack up. But they can still be enjoyable ride experiences. But something about Wild Thing, it just feels lackluster. The hills that you would think would give airtime don't. The biggest culprit here is the entire return trip. I mean, granted, I've only been to Valleyfair once, so I don't know, it's possible that it could have just been running slow on the day I went, but there was little to no airtime at all on those final hills, which is sad because on rides like Steel Force or Mamba, that return trip with those smaller airtime hills is like the best part. I'm thinking it has something to do with the profiling of those hills, or the speed that it's taking them, but in a way, it kind of feels like a graceful monorail.
Call me critical, but after you do so many roller coasters that just have amazing execution, perfectly crafted elements, and then you just do something like this where it just kind of glides along and feels like it's not really doing anything, it kind of leaves much to be desired.
I think another culprit here, while Wild Thing kind of suffers, is this turnaround. In theory, it should be really fun. A lot of really wide turns here. You're really feeling that speed before you go into more hills. I mean, this is the same sort of thing that we get on rides like Mamba, Steel Force, even Steel Dragon 2000. But when Wild Thing does it, I mean, the best thing about it is that it's fun to watch. It's a very pretty ride and the colors are great. I love how it passes by rides like Steel Venom near the front entrance. It looks great, but as you're just kind of gliding along, not really doing anything, it almost gets, dare I say it, boring. Now, I will say, where you sit definitely has an impact on your ride experience. Personally, I would recommend the front row on Wild Thing. I think it is a more exciting ride in that seat. During moments like the first hill, you would actually get some floater airtime. I think the first hill is arguably the best moment on Wild Thing. Unfortunately, it's just kind of downhill from there. Another main point that I'll kind of bring up, and I'm thinking this is something directly to do with Valleyfair because you don't really see this on the other rides of this type, but that's the retracting seat belts on Wild Thing. This is the same sort of thing that you also get on Renegade, Excalibur. All the big rides at this park have them, and what it means is when you buckle that seatbelt, it is tight against you. Like, no room for give. It's not the same thing as having a normal seatbelt where even when it's tight, it has a little bit of give to it. It means that airtime experience will be a little bit more enjoyable. A retracting seatbelt keeps you flat up tight against the back of the seat. It almost prevents you from getting more airtime. If they went with a more traditional seatbelt as a secondary restraint to your lap bar, you probably would enjoy Wild Thing a bit more. But that being said, again, I think the biggest culprit here is the profiling and the speed that you're taking some of these moments. I'm not sure I'd even put Wild Thing in the best 3 rides at Valleyfair, which is crazy because it's by far the most iconic. But that's not me necessarily saying that it is a bad roller coaster. Like, it's not painful or anything. You just kind of get off and you're like, alright, that was fine. It doesn't leave me wanting to run back in line and do it again. So it absolutely could be worse. If anything, Wild Thing proves that you can have the height, you can have the speed, you can have the length, but if you're not actually doing anything interesting, your ride experience is going to be affected. Which is a shame because Wild Thing visually looks amazing. Valleyfair is a really fun park. I was really hoping for something more here. Luckily though, Renegade makes up for it. So for Wild Thing's final score, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. If you're unfamiliar with the scale, 1 means it is an absolutely horrible ride experience, 10 means it is incredible, with 5 being it's just kind of okay, there in the middle. I'd put Wild Thing slightly below meh, with the sad part being with a few simple fixes in the design phase, I think this could have been a really excellent ride. But I mean, that's alright. Morgan has had a lot of great other roller coasters. They're not all going to be winners. So I want to hear from you guys down in the comments below. What do you think think of Wild Thing at Valleyfair? Do you agree with the thoughts that I have brought up? If you disagree, let me know why. And of course, stay tuned for more reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.